Welcome to the Agave and Lime Show. I'm Ginger.
And I'm Salt.
And no, those are not our real names. So today I'm going to be telling Salt the entire plot of arguably the best K-drama of 2024, Lovely Runner. So let's dive right in. The story opens on July 22nd, 2009. There's a total eclipse outside. Everybody's out on the streets looking at the total eclipse in the sky. A group of boys is heading over somewhere in a car together. Imsol, our main character, is lying on a hospital bed. Imsol and her mom are in the hospital, and there's like the radio playing in the background. Her mom is cutting her toenails, and she accidentally nicks her, and Imsol's bleeding, but there's no reaction. Imsol doesn't even flinch. Her mom's trying not to cry, and you can tell she's really flustered. So she's like leaving to clean her up, and she accidentally knocks over a glass vase in the process. There's glass shards all over the floor, and Imsol bends over and picks up a glass shard as soon as her mom leaves. And she's clutching it hard enough for her hand to start bleeding, and that's when her phone rings. But she isn't picking it up, and she has no intention of picking it up. But the old lady in the bed across from her is like, just pick up your damn phone. It's really annoying, there's other people around. So Imsol finally answers the call, and there's this weird echo. She's hearing the person on the phone, but also from the radio playing next to her. Remember the group of boys I mentioned earlier? They're actually a new K-pop group called Eclipse, and they're on a radio talk show right now, and they're calling people up and talking to them, basically asking them, we're Eclipse, have you heard of us? So they're just doing PR. And Ryu Sun Jae, one of the people in the band, is the one who calls her. So Sanjay introduces himself. He's like, have you heard of us? And she's like, no. So she's clearly not interested, and she's about to hang up. But the host butts in, and she offers her a gift, a pair of sneakers. And Imsol is still like just trying to hang up, but the host is like, oh, it's a beautiful day outside, wouldn't it be nice to use our sneakers and take a walk outside? That's when Imsol really gets really angry, and she's like, there are people who want to die right now because it's a beautiful day outside. You want to give me a gift? Fine, make me walk again. That's when we find out that Imsol is actually paralyzed from the waist down, and she can no longer walk. She throws the phone on the ground, but the call is still connected, and the host is really flustered and trying to apologize. But Sanjay's like, okay, hold on, give me a second. I know you're still listening. I just wanted to say thank you for being alive. I'm sure that's what your loved ones feel right now. Just try living today because it's beautiful. It might rain tomorrow, so live while waiting for the rain to stop. And one day, life might become okay again. And the call disconnects. Imsol's mom comes back to find her crying, and they both just hug and bawl their eyes out. The next scene, we jump to December 31st, 2022. A lot of time has passed, and we see Imsol's room, and it's filled with fan merch of Ryu Sun Jae and Eclipse, but mainly Ryu Sun Jae. Imsol wakes up to find her grandmother wearing her watch and playing around with it, and Imsol's really worried because her grandma might damage the watch because she has dementia, but also Imsol paid $2,000 US dollars for it at auction because it used to belong to Ryu Sun Jae.
Wait, so is Imsol still in the same condition? She's still paralyzed?
Yeah, she's still paralyzed.
Okay.
But she's alive. Okay, and she's his super fan. It's like this old digital watch from the 2000s, those waterproof ones. And today, December 31st, 2022, is Eclipse's first concert after 5 years. So she's obviously going to attend it. Imsol heads to the concert, and her best friend takes time off work just so she can drive her to the concert, and she even brings her a present. It's a yearbook from when they were in high school. So apparently, Imsol never knew this, but Ryu Sun Jae was in the school across from hers when they were in high school, but she never knew about his existence. And her best friend are talking about how, she should have been obsessed with him since high school. Then she could be a fan success story who knew him before he ever debuted. But she was actually too busy standing someone else then. So she reaches the concert, and her friend isn't attending the concert. She takes time off work just to drop her because she's paralyzed, and
Right.
So she reaches the concert, and she's hanging out with all of her other fandom friends, and that's when she gets a message asking her to come for an interview immediately. So she applied to a job earlier because she wants to be a movie director.
Okay.
And she's been applying for jobs, and I'm assuming I don't think it's explicitly mentioned, but I'm assuming she doesn't really have a college degree, or she gets it later or whatever, because of her
Condition.
because she got into an accident. So she finally hears back from this job that she really wanted, and they're like, you need to come in right now for an interview. Okay, I don't know what kind of interview they're conducting. Like, she literally left the house at 4:30 p.m. Okay, it must be at least 5:30 or 6 by now, and they're like, come in for an interview right now. And she's like, okay, I really want this job. So there's still like 2 hours before she needs to enter the concert hall. So she's like, you know what? I can go and make it back. I can do it. And her friend already left after dropping her off. So she takes the bus. She goes for the interview. But as soon as she gets there, they realize that she's in a wheelchair and they do not have an elevator in their building. So she never even gets to interview. Right? Like, like I'd be so angry in this situation, but she's like, you know what? It's okay. Like, it's all for the best. And she's like, okay, I'll just go back to the concert. So she heads back, uses the bus again, naturally gets stuck in traffic and gets super late. When she finally reaches the concert venue, everybody's gone, like nobody's there, everyone's already inside, and she sees a staff member and they're like, I'm sorry, we can't let you in, it's too late, right? It's past the time that you're allowed entry. And she like begs them, and she acts really pitiful, like, you know, oh, it's so cold, I can't be out here, like, please let me in and all that. And the staff member like finally gives in and she's like, okay, fine, like if you show me your ticket, I'll let you in. But
She doesn't have the ticket?
yeah. She realizes that she lost her ticket. Like when she was getting on the bus, it accidentally fell out of her bag. So now she doesn't have the ticket either. But she just waits outside of the concert hall and kind of tries to listen to the concert, even though she can barely hear it. And once the concert is done, everyone's outside and she's like, okay, whatever, like I'm just happy that I kind of got to be near them and near Ryu Sun Jae. She really is an insane super fan. So after the concert, everybody's like leaving and all of that, and in the crowd, someone knocks into her phone falls to the ground and it breaks. So her phone isn't gonna turn on anymore. And then it starts snowing to add to everything. Of course it does. But it's like the first snow of the year, and she's just happy because she's like, oh, Sanjay must be happy. I know he loves the snow. That's her reaction.
Just based on their one interaction.
No, she knows because she's a super fan, and K-pop fans know everything about their idol. Imsol has to take the bus back home because her phone isn't working. She can't reach anybody. And she's in her electric wheelchair on a bridge in the middle of the night, alone. And it's snowing, and of course her wheelchair breaks down. Okay, that's when she's like, I've had it. Like until then she was super positive. She's like, no matter what happens, she's like, it's okay, like, you know, that's fine, and just trying to be upbeat about it. But after that she just like fully breaks down and starts crying. And right then a car stops next to her, and guess who gets out?
Sanjay.
Exactly. Ryu Sun Jae gets out and he's like holding an umbrella. Obviously she's really shocked and she's just frozen. He's literally her idol. He's trying to talk to her. He's like, what's wrong? Is your wheelchair broken? Like, what's going on? And she's just frozen. She's like not responding. We can hear her thoughts. That, like, you know, she's inside, she's like, talk to him, he's your idol, like, why aren't you saying anything? But outside, like, she's just like not moving an inch. He sees, like, you know, like she's shivering in the cold, and he literally just takes out a hand warmer and puts it in her hand, and she just starts crying. And he's like, why are you crying? I haven't even done anything. And normally when a guy says that, it's because they're panicking because a girl is crying and they don't know what to do. But it totally sounds like he's flirting with her.
Okay, so basically he does like her in the first sight of her.
You'll find out. So she finally opens her mouth and she's like, you know, I'm your fan. He's like, I know. She's like, what do you mean? How do you know? So she's still wearing her fan gear. Like she has this light up sign on her head with her username on it. And it literally says like grab Sanjay and run or something. That's her username on the fan site. So he's like, okay, of course you're my fan. He can see it. And she's like, you know, I'm a really big fan, all of that. And he's like, okay, thank you. She's like, actually, I should be the one thanking you. And he doesn't really understand what she means. But, you know, we can hear her thoughts, right? It's because he saved her life. And that's why she's such a big fan, because he gave her the will to live again. So he's like, okay, like, would you like a ride home? I can't just leave my fan stranded here. I'll give you a ride.
He is flirting.
It actually sounds so sus like that. Like if a random stranger or even your idol is like, why don't I give you a ride home? It actually sounds very suspicious. So she's super excited. She's about to say yes when her best friend shows up. I'm like, well, okay.
Bad timing.
Well, it's only the first episode. We can't have them already having.
But
you know,
it's
all the
also
good
how one bad thing after the other,
that's
and this is
true.
one of the other bad things that happens.
But at the very least, like, she got to meet him, right? She's really happy about that.
Yeah.
So her best friend shows up and she can't be like, no, I'll leave my best friend and leave with you, right? So she's like, okay, I'll go
Yeah.
home with my best friend. He gives her his umbrella. And she's like, okay, I must give you something in return. So she takes out, like, I guess it's like, okay, you gave me something, so I have to give you something, that kind of sentiment. And she's like, I don't have anything on me right now, but she has a little box of candy. And she's like, I know this is your favorite, so here, I'll just give you this. Okay.
Of course. She
Yeah.
has a...
And she goes home. And she's like obsessing over the umbrella and hand warmer he gave her. Obviously, right? It's something her idol touched. And
What's the color of the umbrella?
black. This is not the one you're thinking of.
I got it.
So she adds the umbrella and hand warmer to like her collection of Ryu Sun Jae's things. And remember I told you she has his old watch that she bought at auction, and that's also like part of the collection. And it suddenly like kind of glows for a split second. And she looks at it and she's like, did I hallucinate? Like, it's an old watch, it shouldn't be working, right? But it lit up. She's like, okay, I think I was just seeing things. And she puts it on and she's just messing with it. And she falls asleep. That's when we see Sanjay's hotel room, and his table is like covered with like a bunch of meds all spilled everywhere. And Sanjay's standing at the edge of the balcony, and he looks really like sick and tired. And then he lands in the pool. Okay, he has fallen off the side of the building.
Is it intentional?
You'll find out. All of a sudden, Imsol like hears her phone going off constantly. She's receiving a ton of messages. So she's on a fan group with all of these other fans, and they're like, Ryu Sun Jae's dead. They're saying he's dead, like all of that. And she's like, oh, maybe like anti-fans are just spreading malicious rumors again and all of that. But someone has a video, literally, of like
Him falling into the pool.
no, they have a video of him being pulled out of the water and like them trying to give him CPR and trying to wake him up. Can you imagine if someone had a video of him falling into the water? So Imsol's like, what is going on? Like, you know, how can he be dead? And they're claiming that he jumped.
Got it.
So she finds out which hospital he's at because, like I said, fans know everything. And she's like, I'm gonna go there right now. It's literally the middle of the night, okay? Her electric wheelchair is broken down, right? So she is in her manual wheelchair out on the streets wheeling to the hospital. She crosses a bridge. She crosses a bridge, like knocks into someone and ends up losing the watch. Remember she was playing with his watch earlier and she fell asleep with it on? She just left the house with it, like without taking it off, and it like falls into the water under the bridge. She's like, okay, I need to go get the watch. So she's panicking. She's not thinking straight. That's what it is. Like, it is unrealistic if it's practical, but I guess it's realistic in the sense of how little she's thinking through things right now.
Okay. Makes sense. She's devastated. that
Exactly. Like, you know, it's really like
Ryu Sun Jae is
hitting her
dead.
hard, and she's like, there's no way he's dead. I need to go find out. Like, I need to see it with my own eyes. So, you know, her watch falls in the water and she's like, I need to get this watch. It's important to me. So she tries to go, like, she goes around under the bridge, and it's like there's like stairs there. She literally leaves her wheelchair at the top of the stairs and drags her body into the water, like down the stairs and into the water. And she's like crawling through the little creek, trying to find the watch. And at the same time, they're also showing Sanjay being resuscitated in the ER. They keep trying to save him, and they're like, you know, giving him the electric shock and all of that. They finally stop. Like, he flatlines. His heart isn't beating anymore, you know, and they declare his time of death. And it's literally January 1st, 2023, 12 a.m. So like the very first moment of 2023. And the watch starts lighting up and glitching. It's flashing and has the number 3 on it.
Number 3.
Yeah, and it's like shows the number 3 on it.
Okay.
And that's when Imsol like reaches the watch and grabs it. And she looks up, and Korea has like these giant screens on buildings which like constantly display like news and stuff. And it's reporting his death, right? He's a huge celebrity, so it's reporting his death. And she's like, okay, it's too late. Like, it's officially on the news. It's not just some random article. She's fully in denial. She pulls out her phone and she's looking it up. The articles are all like, okay, he was suffering from depression, insomnia. He was on medication. He actually wanted to retire, but like they weren't letting him, and that there were a lot of issues within the group. First of all, I was really surprised that there was so much information out already immediately after his death, okay? But anyway, she's panicked. Like, she's really freaking out because he was literally alive like less than a few hours ago when she saw him. And then she's like she remembers like what he told her all those years ago and how he gave her the will to live, and she's really angry because he's like, you didn't listen to your own words. And that's when like the watch lights up again and everything freezes. She blinks, she opens her eyes, and she's in a classroom sleeping on her desk while a teacher yells at her.
Back in time, you mean?
And you'll find out. But yes. I mean, it's not a cliffhanger. She's going to find out
Yeah,
soon.
it's so obvious. Like, if she's in a classroom and
Yeah.
you had just described how he was in a school which was opposite to the school she studied in.
Yeah.
So I was expecting this.
I mean, when I was watching the show, when the news of his death being confirmed came out, because I didn't know anything about the show. Okay, not even the time travel. I was like, is the show over? But yeah, she's in a classroom sleeping on her desk, and her teacher's like yelling at her, and she thinks she's dreaming, which is a reasonable assumption to make, obviously. And the teacher yells at her so hard, like she gets surprised, and she stands up, and she looks down, and she's like, wait a second, I can walk. And she's like, okay, this is definitely a dream. And then she looks out the window and she's like, if I'm in class right now, if I'm in my high school classroom right now, that means Sanjay is like across the street. And she just takes off running. She's like, I'm going to find this man. So she goes to Ryu Sun Jae's school, asks around, and finally finds out that like he's at the swimming pool. And at the pool, there's like a bunch of people there. There's like coaches and swimmers and whatnot. They're actually doing like a mock swim meet for the 2008 Beijing Olympics. Okay. And Ryu Sun Jae is like one of the participants.
So he went on from being an athlete to a band
to an idol, yeah. Either way, I guess he was destined to be a celebrity in some way. So all the swimmers, like they enter and they get in the water, they do the competition, and they're almost done with it, and she's still running there. Okay.
That's where the show's name probably comes from. Lovely Runner.
I guess, yeah, maybe. Because that's not the name of the show in Korean, right? I think it's... remember what I said her username was on the fan site? Like grab Sanjay and run or something like that? That or some variation of that is the Korean name.
Okay.
Which makes more sense, right? She wants to grab him and run or something like that. It's cute. A lovely runner is a little strange. I don't know what to tell you. So she finally makes it to the pool, and Sanjay comes out of the water. They're just done with the competition. He's like coming out of the water, and she sees him. She's like, he's alive. She's like, he's alive. He was just dead like 5 minutes ago. The only thing on her mind is, I just found out he's dead, and now I'm looking at him alive. And she starts crying and immediately like starts running to him. Like she screams his name and she's running to him. Side note, there's like actually a famous athlete who's like the favorite to win, or like the one who's definitely going to be in the Olympics, and he's part of this mock meet. This entire mock meet, the purpose of it is for him. Park Tae-won, like he's a real Olympic athlete who won gold in 2008, and they actually got him to do a cameo in this. But all the security guards and everyone around Park Tae-won are like, oh no, this random crazy fan is like trying to assault this celebrity athlete. Exactly. And they're like, trying to protect him, but she just like runs past them, right? And she's walking and she's running to the almost nobody.
That's funny.
Yeah. And she's like screaming his name and running up to him. And he's just standing there, like his coach just gave him a towel. He's still standing there half naked. She runs up to him and like slams into him and hugs him. I'm sorry, I didn't realize you were going through so much. You must have been in so much pain. She's referring to him being depressed and
from the future.
Yeah, she's referring to all of that. And she's like, I'm sorry, I didn't know any of that. And I'm sorry you were alone. And she's like, I love you, Sanjaya.
Directly. There's nothing else.
The end. And he's just standing there, like so shocked, doesn't know what to do. And then the security shows up, and they're like dragging her out. It was romantic until that moment. And then she starts screaming, but it's just a dream. Like, why are you dragging me away? Sanjay, I love you. Now she just sounds like a crazy stalker fan.
See, I have a problem with the fact that she's not happy she can walk and run, but rather...
So we'll get to that, right? Because right now it's more about she thinks she's dreaming and she hasn't processed anything yet. And right now, basically, one of the most important people in her life died. And 5 minutes later, she's seeing him alive.
Okay.
Because I think this show definitely does go into like fan-idol relationships and how it can be. Like, how important that person can be to you, even though you've never actually met them. although she is an exception because she met him. So, the security drags her out and she ends up falling and she gets hurt. And she's like, wait a second, is this really a dream? Like, why am I feeling pain? And like, if it's a dream, why am I not waking up? And then she's trying to recall, like, okay, what's the last thing I remember? Just like, I remember looking at the watch because it was flashing. And then she's like, wait a second, don't tell me I actually died. So at that moment, like she like walked out of the school and she's walking around and she's standing on a bridge, okay? Or she's standing in front of a bridge and she sees the bridge. And there's this like lore about how souls cross a bridge to the afterlife. A soul after they die have to cross a bridge for them to be in the afterlife. And she's like, wait a second, will I be in the afterlife if I cross this bridge? So she's sitting at the entrance of the bridge, refusing to cross it, and she's like huddled on the ground and, just honestly looks like her soul has left her body. And that's when Sanjay finds her, okay? I don't know what it is with these two and running into each other on bridges, but she thinks she's dead and she thinks he's dead. And they're both dead together right now. So when he reaches out to her and he's like, hey, are you okay? Because she's literally huddling on the ground. And he's like, are you okay? And she falls and he's like, oh, it's a ghost. And he's like, what the heck is up with this crazy person? And she's like, okay, if I can see you, that means I'm really dead, right? Because in her head, Sanjay is dead.
He's dead for real because it's been announced on the news.
Yeah, exactly. Like she knows Sanjay is dead and this is a dream or like the afterlife or whatever she thinks. And if she's seeing him, that means she's dead too, because otherwise how would she see him, right? They're both ghosts.
That's great
together.
logic.
Yeah. And her like watch falls on the ground when he like, tries to reach out to her. Her watch falls on the ground and he tries to give it back and she's like, it's yours anyway, just keep it. Because I mean, technically it was, right? She just bought it at auction. And then she's like, you know what? This might be for the best. I'll just go with you to the afterlife so you won't be lonely. Then she remembers her mom and starts crying again. So like, my poor mom, I can't just leave her. She cries a lot in the show, especially in the beginning. Even the actress like said in an interview, like, it's actually insane how much she cried. Then she's like, okay, we haven't actually crossed the bridge yet, so we might have a chance to do something. So she's like, Sanjay, don't cross this bridge. He's really confused. He's like, what are you talking about? My house is on the other side, so I do need to cross the bridge. And she's like physically trying to get in his way and constantly like blocking his path. And he's like trying to go around her. And he just gives up and he's like, shoves her away and he's about to leave when she hugs him from the back and she starts screaming like, no, you can't, we need
like a piggyback.
No, she's too small for that. Okay, also that would be another type of assault. She already assaulted him at the pool. Right, but she just hugs him like a normal hug, like she's holding his waist.
Got it.
Yeah,
and she's stopping him.
Yeah, she's physically holding him back and she's like, no, you can't leave. We need to live. Let's live together. And she means it in the sense of, let's both of us stay alive together, literally. But obviously he's like, it sounds really weird, right? Like you see a stranger and you propose to live together.
That's not just propose to live together. You're assaulting him, getting physically touchy, telling him things he doesn't understand.
Exactly, right? So he freaks out, pushes her away, and there's a taxi passing by right at that moment. And he's like, thank God. He gets in the taxi and he leaves immediately, right? And that's when Imsol's like, why is there a taxi in the afterlife? And then her phone rings and it's her mom. And she's like, is this another ghost calling me? And she picks up and immediately it's her mom yelling at her for skipping school. And she's like, wait, it sounds exactly like my mom. And her mom's like, if you're not home in an hour, I'm going to put you on an express train to hell. And she's like, wait, is it confirmed? Like, am I actually in the afterlife? So she's like, okay, I need to go home and figure out what's going on. So Ryu Sun Jae like finally makes it home with the taxi. And he's like talking to his dad on the phone and they're talking about his shoulder because he's an athlete and he ended up hurting his shoulder before and he had to get surgery for it. So now he's back after rehab because originally he would have also qualified for the Olympics, but he couldn't because he was in rehab for his shoulder injury.
Got it.
So, he's like back, trying to get back into the swing of things and he's like trying to set a new record and break the old ones, all of that, and like be qualified for the next Olympics. That's what his goal is. And like he's telling his dad, like, I'm good and all of that, but clearly we can see like he's in pain, like he's not letting people know, but his shoulder hurts. He's just trying to do his shoulder exercises and all of that.
So he's doing all of this for his father.
Well, I don't know if if it's doing it for his dad, but it's probably definitely a motivation for him that his dad also really wants to do this and like he doesn't want to disappoint him. But also, no, I will say, like, I mean, it's not really a spoiler, but he loves swimming. He really enjoys it. I'm assuming it gives him purpose or whatever, even though he doesn't say that in that exact way. So, you know, he's doing his shoulder exercises and all of that. But he keeps thinking of all the things that Imsol said when she practically assaulted him at the pool. He's like, no, don't think about it. You know, she's a weirdo. Just don't do it. You know, like she keeps invading his thoughts because he's like, what the heck was that? You know, that's when he sees his watch on the table and he realizes his watch is at home and the watch that she gave him was not actually his watch. Okay,
So those two watches look alike.
so you'll know, you'll find out. You will find out soon. So meanwhile, Imsol goes home. She's like looking around, even from the outside, it looks exactly like it used to years ago. And she goes in, and her mom's just like exercising, and her mom looks so young. Of course, her mom is still yelling at her for skipping school and even forgetting her backpack. And that's when she turns, sees the calendar, and it says June 2008. Okay, it's been nearly 15 years. She went back 15 years. Her first thought is that her grandma doesn't have dementia yet. Because like in 2022, 23, her grandma has dementia and she can actually talk to her if it's 2008. So, you know, she spends some time like talking to her grandmother, exploring her old house, looking at her old room and all of that. And that's when she's finally alone, it finally sinks in for her that her legs are fine and that it's before her accident because it's 2008 and her accident hasn't happened yet. And she
Until
finally
2009.
I don't know if her accident happens in 2009, but she was still dealing with the recovery in 2009.
Got it. I was assuming that the hospital scene that you first
Yeah,
described.
that is after her accident, but I don't know if it's like immediately after her accident. Maybe it's been a while and she's still dealing with it.
Got it.
Yeah.
Through the episode, at any point, do they tell you how she got into that accident?
Eventually, like when it comes up in the plot, not yet. So it's finally sinking in for Imsol that like she's back in time, her legs are fine, she can walk again. You know, she's really happy. So she's like, she's still kind of worried that she's gonna wake up tomorrow and it's gonna be a dream, right? Like she'll wake up and realize that okay, it was just a nice happy dream. So she goes to sleep between her mom and grandma, and she's like, okay, let's wake up tomorrow and hopefully I'll still be here. So she opens her eyes, it's the next day, and she can't feel her legs. And she's like, okay, I knew it. It was a dream. It was too good to be true. And then she looks down, and it was actually her brother, like, lying across on her. So her legs were numb, which is why she couldn't feel them.
I like it. I like the fact that there's this disappointment and then it's followed by...
Exactly. I think there's Lovely Rana has a lot of, like, deep emotions and stuff, but it's done in a more lighthearted, accessible kind of way where you don't feel like you're being hit over the head with overly emotional things constantly. It's the next day, like she literally came back in time yesterday, right? So now today she gets dressed, goes to school, and she sees Sanjay again.
Of course,
right? She's gonna be seeing him everywhere now once she noticed his existence. So she finally realizes that he's actually alive, like not just an instinctive reaction of, oh, he was dead 5 minutes ago and he's alive in front of me, not that, but like her actually realizing that she's back in time, he's actually alive right now, right? And obviously she starts crying. It makes sense that she cries, but it is funny how much she cries. So she starts crying again. It starts raining. So Sanjay sees her like being drenched in the rain and crying. Like he goes up to her with his umbrella. He's holding the umbrella over her and it looks exactly the same as when he met her on the bridge in 2022.
the future.
Yeah, it's like the same scene. Even the angle he's holding it at with him getting drenched by the rain or snow just so she can have more protection under the umbrella. And he's like, why do you always cry when you see me? Like, why are you crying? Again, the same dialogue. And there's also all the other students that are outside because it's like before school started. And everyone's outside running around and they see this guy and girl and they're talking and the girl is crying. Naturally, they're like, oh, maybe they're lovers and they're arguing. So Sanjay's like, okay, just let's leave. And he drags her off to like a more secluded place. They're not talking. They're just standing there, like taking shelter from the rain and just waiting for it to stop, like at a doorstep. She's like already thinking a million thoughts. She isn't saying anything, but inside she's like, okay, you were yapping away yesterday so much when you thought it was a dream. Why aren't you saying anything right now? You know, like she's like talking to herself, like, okay, just speak. And finally, like Sanjay breaks the silence and he's like, what is your deal? What is going on? What are you doing?
Who are you?
Yeah. And she starts saying all kinds of weird shit, right? Like immediately. She's like, I'm your fan, this is my name in the fan site, all of that. And naturally, he's like, what are you saying? Like, I have no idea what you're talking about. And she's like, oh yeah, wait, he's just a regular guy right now. He's just a regular student. Even though he's still her idol in her mind, he's obviously still just a regular student. So she's like, okay, she finally introduces herself. She's like, I'm Imsol. And he's like, yes, I know. I can see your name tag.
This has happened twice now.
Exactly. Right. So many callbacks. And he's like, forget all that. Just, why do you keep crying when you see me? You even cried yesterday at the pool. And she's like, what do I tell him? So she's like, you remind me of someone I like a lot. And naturally he's like, who? And she's like, my dog.
That's funny.
So she used the word for dog, like, which sounds cuter, more like puppy, but he uses the word that sounds more like an insult, like dog. And he's like, do I look like a dog to you? And she's like, no, my dog was a really good swimmer. He's like, okay, never mind that. How did you know about the mock swim meet yesterday? And how did you know my name? And she's like, what do I tell him? And she's like, the dog. Actually, because my dog is such a good swimmer, I'm a fan of swimming as a sport. So I would look up like competition clips and stuff. And from them, I found out about the mock meet and also who are the good swimmers. And of course, I went to cheer. But I saw you and then you reminded me of my dog, so I naturally started crying and then I naturally confessed my love. She definitely doesn't sound natural at all.
And the boy is believing all of this?
No, he's not an idiot, thank God. So he obviously does not believe her. It sounds ridiculous. He's like, okay, what's the dog's name? She racks her brain and she's like, the dog's name is Otter. Like,
Otter?
Yeah. Like,
as in the...
Yeah, the animal. And he's like, why would you name a dog Otter? And he's like, because he's a good swimmer. He's like, why didn't you just name it Seal then? So he's like, whatever. And he gives her back the watch that she gave him the previous day. And he's like, this isn't mine. Here.
Take the other identical watch.
Yes, the exact same watch. Take it back. She sees the watch and it reminds her of all the weird things she did yesterday when she thought it was a dream or when she thought she was dead. She gets really embarrassed and runs away. But she grabs his umbrella that was like on the side. She grabs his umbrella and runs away in her panic, okay? So she goes back to her classroom because, this is the beginning of the school day. Class hasn't started yet. So she goes back to her classroom. She sees all the people there that she hasn't seen in ages. It's really sinking in for her, like it's 2008. And she looks at the watch that she's holding. If this isn't his watch right now, then that means this is the watch that she brought back from the future. So it must have something to do with the fact that she came back to the past. And she's like, okay, I have to be really careful. I cannot press anything on this watch because I don't want to accidentally end up going back to the future. But then she gets startled by something and she does accidentally like end up pressing the button, but nothing happens. Okay, like she's still there. So right now, all we know is that the watch potentially has something to do with it. I mean, we already knew that because we saw the watch flashing. Yeah. Then her teacher calls her up on the stage to like solve a math problem, and she realizes no matter how well you learn in school, you'll forget it eventually after enough time passes.
Very realistic.
Yeah. So she pretends like she's sick all of a sudden, and she sneaks out of she leaves the class with an excuse, but she isn't actually sick, right? She's like, okay, so what can I do? And she's like, I'll go look for Sanjay now. So she goes to find him, and he's like working out in the gym. All of the athletes are, exercising.
Does Sanjay not study?
I don't think I've ever seen him in a classroom. Like, I don't think there are any shots of him in a classroom in high school. I don't think so. But I mean, right now, all he needs to do is be an athlete and like win gold medals and stuff. So she's like watching him, and she's like, I need to stay by his side for the next 15 years and stick to him so that he never develops any thoughts of hurting himself in the future. I need to be right by his side, and I need to come up with a plan that'll allow me to actually always be around him and have a reason for that. She can't just always show up and be like, Sanjaya, and just keep bothering him like she's doing now. That's when she notices like cigarette smoke, like the smell of cigarette smoke coming in through the window above her. She's annoyed. She's like, who's smoking near the gym? So she goes to check what's happening, and she sees these kids. They're like smoking, but they're also fighting. It's like 3 kids against one of them. So she gets really angry and they're about to fight, but she like leaps off the wall. She leaps off a wall and body slams one of them to the ground. And she gets up and then she starts giving a lecture about the effects of cigarette smoke. And if you think she's gonna say, oh, cigarette smoke is bad for you, no. She literally says, do you know how bad it is for the lungs of the swim team? That's all she cares about. She has her priorities straight. So the guy who was fighting against them, like it was 1-on-3, right?
Right.
So the guy who was fighting against them, he turns around and he sees that the backup is arriving for these 3 guys. right? So right now it's 2 against 3 because she's helping him.
Right.
But their backup is arriving and it's like a huge group of like 15 guys. He grabs Imsol's hand and runs away. They find a spot to hide and they manage to evade them. So that's when she sees the guy's face and she realizes it's Kim Tae-sung. Kim Tae-sung is the guy that she was originally obsessed with in 2008. Also a musician, by the way.
Do they all belong to the same band?
No.
Okay.
So he was in a school band and she saw him on stage performing and she had a crush on him. He's her first love. So she looks at him and she's like, oh my god, Kim Tae-sung, I remember you now. Like, it's been so long. She hasn't seen him after that point. She's like, I used to think you were so cool, but looking at you now, you look kind of tacky actually. Because she doesn't have any feelings for him, right, in the future. And he notices that she's acting really weird. He's like, you're acting completely different from yesterday. So that's when he sees a teacher coming. So he gives her the cigarettes and lighter that she confiscated from those kids earlier. He just gives them to her and he's like, okay, see you. And he like leaves, like he runs away immediately. And the teacher catches her and she's holding the cigarettes and lighter. And she keeps trying to convince him. She's like, no, like I was just trying to stop these other guys from smoking. And obviously the teacher doesn't believe her. He's like, you're saying you came to someone else's school to stop someone from smoking. How does that sound even remotely believable? So he's like, okay, you need to be punished. So she has to stand in the schoolyard with her hands up in the air and she has to hold the cigarettes and lighter up like that. Right then, Sanjay walks by because this is outside the gym and he sees her. She's actually trying to hide.
And he's thinking, what's wrong with this girl?
Listen. Well, he'll tell you what he's thinking. she's like trying to hide her face. She's like trying to tilt her head so her hair's covering her face and all of that. And the teacher's like, what are you doing? Stand up straight. And Sanjay obviously notices her. And the teacher is like, stay here until like the end of the day or whatever. And he leaves. So Sanjay walks up to her, grabs the cigarettes and lighter from her hands, like tosses them in the trash next to her. And he's like, Otter would be so sad right now at your reckless behavior. Otter is her made-up dog that he knows is made up, okay? Obviously, she's like, no, I really definitely don't smoke. Like, this is a misunderstanding. I only drink a little when I'm having a hard time. And then she remembers she's underage right now. She's not supposed to be drinking either. So no matter what, she opens her mouth and it just keeps getting worse and worse. And he's like, and he walks away. And she's like, no. Well, I mean, yeah.
And don't misunderstand me.
And he's like, the camera over there is fake. You can leave. The teacher's not going to know. And he walks away. So she finally escapes the punishment. She heads back to her school and she runs into Kim Tae-sung on the way back. Again, like the guy she had a crush on originally, her first love. And he thinks she was helping him just so she could get his attention. And she's like, what on earth is going on? What a weirdo. That's her reaction, right? And then she's like, whatever. And she leaves. School's over, everything. At the end of the day, she goes to a little cafe with her best friend. And she asks her advice. She's like, how do you make someone your friend? And her friend's like, oh, make a good first impression. And she remembers her practically assaulting him at the pool. So no, terrible first impression. So her friend's like, okay, make a good second impression. And she's like, oh, he caught her smoking. Or he thinks he caught her smoking. So bad second impression too. So her friend's like, just give up. And she's like, no, I have to be friends with him. And she's like, wait, is this a guy? How can you move on so quickly? I thought you were still heartbroken after being rejected by Kim Tae-sung yesterday. And that's when Imsol realizes, literally the day before, she confessed to him and even gave him a letter, okay, right before she traveled back in time. So she goes home, she finds like some of her rough drafts. I'm going to read out what she wrote, the letter. I wondered where all the stars had gone until I found them in your eyes. I now get why I felt so dazzled and couldn't look at you directly. Tae-sung-ga, you're my star, a huge star.
The star went running.
So yeah, she's definitely regretting that she didn't arrive a day earlier.
She would have wanted to undo that.
Yeah. So, she's like, okay, there's nothing I can do at this point. Let's move on. And that's when she remembers, like, her friend, when she asked her earlier, like, how do I become friends with Sanjay? Her friend is like, why don't you just send him a friend request on like this? It's not Facebook, but something like Facebook. So she does send him a friend request, but he almost immediately rejects her. So the next day, she's heading to school. She's walking to the bus stop.
So I have a doubt. Like, he's immediately rejecting it. But why did he help her with the cameras? Why did he tell her that the cameras aren't working?
So you'll find out what's going on. Everything right now is from her perspective.
Exactly.
We don't know what's his perspective yet. You'll find out pretty soon. So the next day, like, she walks to the bus stop. She runs into him at the bus stop. And she realizes, like, we go to school from the same stop. Like, how did I never notice this before? And she tried to talk to him about it. And he's like, it's because he usually has swim practice, so he goes much earlier. And she's like, oh, did we run into each other before at all? And he's like, even if we did, we didn't. He just sounds annoyed with her, okay? okay? And she still has his umbrella that she stole yesterday accidentally, and she's like planning to give it to him. I totally thought there would be a cliche scene of her falling on him. You know, when the bus stops, I thought she would like fall on him and there'd be a typical cliche K-drama scene, but that doesn't happen because something else happens. So when they reach school, like when they reach the stop they're supposed to get off at, she accidentally drops the umbrella she was holding, you know, his umbrella that she stole. So she's trying to pick it up, like she's bends down, she's trying to pick it up, and he gets off the bus, but there's a bunch of people getting on and off, and she gets stuck. And the door closes right before she can get off. So she's like stuck right at the door and the bus leaves. Sanjay's off the bus, he turns around and Imsol's like right there at the window. So he decides to chase the bus down.
Now he's running.
Yeah, he runs after the bus and manages to like get all the way to the front of the bus and like bang on the door to get the driver's attention while he's running next to it to, you know, for him to stop. So the bus stops and Imsol gets off. It is... If you just think about it, it sounds ridiculous, but it is actually somewhat believable because it's a small road, so the bus isn't going that fast, okay? And he's supposed to be an athlete.
Right.
His character is an athlete, so it is like you can obviously they filmed the scene, right? It does look like he's running next, like it looks like it's a manageable pace for someone who's athletic. So I'm choosing to believe it could happen in real life.
I mean, you would know better. You've seen the actual thing happening. I'm just hearing it.
So when she finally gets off the bus, he seems really mad at her, and she's like, okay, thank you for doing that for me. And he's like, who stopped the bus for you? I just wanted my umbrella.
Nice.
Yeah. I really, in that moment, I was like, yeah, he's 19. I feel the 19-year-old. So he walks away, but she keeps walking next to him, and she's like lecturing him about how dangerous that was, because obviously that was dangerous. Like, what if he got hurt? And also because he's an athlete, right? He's like, you should be really careful, because if you end up with an injury, then it'll affect a lot of things. But somehow it ends up with him being like, you should stop smoking first. And she's like, is that why you rejected my friend request? And she's like, here, sniff my fingers, they don't smell like smoke, as proof to be like, I'm not a smoker, because her logic is apparently smokers always have the smell of smoke on their fingers or something. That's what she says. He's like, whatever, and he's like trying to walk around her, but she refuses to take no for an answer, and she keeps shoving her two fingers, like her index finger and middle finger, like she's holding up like a V sign, right? And she keeps shoving it in his face and accidentally sticks her fingers up his nose. I had to like forward this part because I was like, the second-hand embarrassment just killed me. So anyway, Sanjay, like, he doesn't even change his expression. He's like, I am leaving. He just calmly like unplugs his nose and walks out of there. He's like, I'm leaving this situation right now. And his friend, like, he runs into his friend, and his friend tells him that he actually remembers Imsol. Like, he finally recalls who Imsol is. And apparently, Imsol always used to come to their band practice to see Kim Tae-sung, because his friend, like Sanjay's friend and Kim Tae-sung are in the same band. Same school band. And Imsol would always leave, like, chocolates and stuff for Kim Tae-sung.
Got it.
Yeah. Like, Sanjay seems a little irritated, like, listening to all this. I assume that this is more like he was kind of flattered by all of the attention, but now he's realizing that her crazy behavior probably wasn't meant to show affection. And like, he's probably just feeling weird, thinking that, you know, someone who's constantly sticking to him and bugging him actually likes someone else. I mean, at least that was what I thought was happening at that moment. So, you know, he just seems annoyed with her at this point because, like, you know, he's like, what is going on? And Imsol also finally makes it to school. And she sees a poster, like the, you know, the school bulletin board announcements on it. There's a poster for like the upcoming swim competition and the name of the competition. It's like a presidential whatever. But then she sees the name of the competition and she recalls an interview that Sanjay did at some point in the future as an idol, talking about his swimming career. And he says that was the first competition that he was in after he was like back from rehab after his shoulder surgery, but it ends up being his last competition ever because he hurts his shoulder again. So Imsol's like, wait, if this is that competition, I need to
Stop him.
Yeah, I need to stop this. Like, I need to do something about it. So she goes to find him again, and he seems a little annoyed, like, as soon as he sees her. I think it's because he found out about Kim Tae-sung's existence and her feelings for him, not the weird nose plugging.
And the other bugging.
Yeah, so she's like trying to convince him not to participate, right, in the competition. And he's like, why? Okay, tell me why. Just give me a logical reason because you sound insane. She's like, you're going to get hurt again, your shoulder's going to be injured again, and you'll never be able to swim. Like, this will be your last time. But something crazy happens. As soon as she starts saying all of this, everybody freezes. And right as she finishes talking, everything starts moving again. So she's like, what's going on? And she tries again, like tries to say the same thing in a different way. Everything freezes again. Her first reaction is, do I have superpowers? Which I thought was funny. But
So basically, she cannot tell people what happens in their future.
yeah, that's what it seems like right now. So she tries to type a message on her phone, like text it instead of speaking it out loud. And then she types it, she's able to type it, but the second she turns the phone screen towards him, time freezes again, and we can actually see the message being deleted. And then as soon as the screen goes blank again, like as soon as the message box is empty, time resumes. And he looks at it and he's like, what? What do you want me to look at? Like an empty phone screen? Like, what do you want? And he leaves, right? Because like she's just standing there in shock, and he leaves. He's like, I guess she doesn't have anything to contribute to this. Okay, I remember when I first watched the show, I remember thinking like, oh, it's gonna be a cute love story where she goes back in time and changes their fate and falls in love in the process. But what is going on, right? Like there's a lot of other stuff. So she goes back to her class and she's trying to figure out like what's going on. And then she was like, maybe time stops if I tell him about the future. So she looks around and they're currently learning about the US government in class. And so she yells out, like, Obama is going to be the president of the United States. And time does stop. So she can't tell anybody anything about the future in a definitive way. So yeah, she's like, okay, so I have to figure out, how to stop him from being in the swim competition. And she remembers even in that interview, like he always regretted it, thinking that he might have pushed himself too hard and maybe he shouldn't have done that. But then he eventually comes to believe it was his destiny to be an idol, which is why that it had to happen for him to become an idol. So her conclusion is, if he hadn't retired from swimming, if he hadn't quit that, he would still try to be a professional athlete and he would not be an idol. So he wouldn't struggle with mental health issues and he wouldn't eventually jump off a building. So if he doesn't become an idol, if he doesn't hurt his shoulder, if he continues to swim, he won't be an idol and he'll live. Like, there's so much riding in this one swimming competition. There's like so much at stake right now. At the same time, like at home, we see Imsol's mom and a random Ajushi arguing. Ajushi as in a middle-aged Korean uncle. Her mom actually runs like a video rental store, VHS tapes and DVD also, I think. And earlier, she noticed that like a movie hadn't been returned yet. So she called the number and it was that Arushi was arguing with her. And he says he never rented a movie. And she's like, what are you talking about? Like, your name and phone number are right here. And, this is the late fee, pay it. And she hangs up. Later, like, they actually run into each other in person. And she's arguing with him, is this your way of trying to avoid paying the late fee? And he's like, I never rented the movie. So she's like, maybe you're just embarrassed about renting an A-rated movie. Because it's basic instinct. So he's like, I watched it a long time ago, okay, in the theater with my wife. It was a movie date. So anyway, that's what's going on with her mom at home.
Why do I get this feeling that this man is Ryu Sun Jae's father?
Yeah, he is. He is. He totally is.
Spot on.
Yeah. So now it's the end of the day. Sanjay's done with his swim practice and he's heading home when he runs into a monk, okay? And it seems like an old lady. Her face is covered, like it's part of the monk outfit. Like she's wearing this hat. You can't really see her face clearly. And she's like, oh, I see that you were born like during the first frost of the year. Bad luck is coming your way.
And
then he's like, okay, whatever. But she's like, don't you feel like there's a burden on your shoulders? Don't you feel like your shoulders are heavy? And he's like, what? Like, his shoulders does hurt, right? So he actually like pauses. He's like, okay, maybe she knows what she's talking about. And then the old lady is like, oh, it's because there's a virgin water ghost who died a wrongful death. And she's looking for a bachelor to drag into the afterlife with her. So you need to stay away from water for 3 more days. And that's when we see like Imsol is under the hat, pretending to be a monk. This is her new strategy to get him to not participate in the swim competition. So she's like being really insistent about him staying away from water. And he's trying to leave, right? So he's like, okay, fine, I promise I won't even shower for the next 3 days. And he leaves, but obviously he doesn't believe her. Right? He has an important swim competition, like he doesn't care. She's like, what do I do? As he's about to leave, she's like, you have a mole under your collarbone, don't you? And he gets a little concerned, but he's like, I'm sure a lot of people do. And then she's like, you also have a scar on the bottom of your foot. And he's like, did you see it? How did you know? She's like, the ghost saw it, okay? So you better listen to what I said. And he actually seems a little convinced because he's like scared. And she knows all this because, she's seen his body in the future in his idol photos. She leaves. She's like, okay, I've accomplished my goal. And that's when she runs into Kim Tae-sung around her house, I guess. And Kim Tae-sung had just been in a fight because some people spit on his motorbike and he calls it his baby. But anyway, he had been in a fight and there's like wounds on his face and all of that. She remembers her friend telling her he never actually ended up graduating high school. Imsol doesn't know all of this because she never knew all of this because she got into her accident and then she didn't care about anything all these other people were doing, right? And she definitely didn't care about Kim Tae-sung, her once crush. He got into a fight and they told him, if you don't drop out, we'll expel you. So he ended up dropping out and he never graduated from high school. So she remembers that and she's like, okay, let me just try to let me try to help him. Like, I don't know if she's thinking that far yet, but she's like, let me just try to help him. And she gets like, there's a pharmacy like right across the street, so she gets some medicine and she applies it. It's like, you shouldn't get into fights. I'm sure your parents would be like really concerned about you. She sounds like her true age because she's supposed to be in her 30s. She's like, don't make them worry. You may not get it, but as you get older, you'll understand your parents better. Obviously, she's referring to her personal experience, how much her mom went through after her accident and how much she had to deal with. So she applies all of the medicine and she gives him his lecture and she's like, okay, you're good to go. And then he walks her to her house. Like, they're just talking about something and she's still wearing her monk's outfit from earlier, right? They're right in front of her house when they see Sanjay coming from the opposite direction. He obviously sees her, realizes she tricked him, and then Kim Tae-sung introduces himself, and then Sanjay realizes, oh, this is the guy that my friend was talking about. This is the guy that she has a crush on. And now they're together after she just tricked me. So he gets really angry. He's like, he walks away. She still runs after him. She's like, okay, I'm sorry I tricked you, but I can really see ghosts and you have to be careful of water. He goes into his house and slams the gate in her face. And that's when she steps back and realizes, wait a second, he lives right across from me. Like, their front gates are separated by 10 feet. That's how close they live, but she never knew in her
past life.
I don't know if past life is the right word. In the original timeline, I guess.
Life, yeah.
So now Imsol is stressing about what to do with the competition and how to stop Sanjay. The competition is literally tomorrow and she's trying to figure out a new game plan. I mean, obviously she's run out of ideas. She even tried being a monk. That's when she looks out her window and she sees Sanjay like leaving his house and she's like, where is he going in the middle of the night? Sanjay goes to practice one more time and he does think about it, like everything she says, because she's like, why don't you just, all I'm saying is to check on your shoulder, right? Look before you leave. You just have to check, and if you feel fine, then you go ahead with it and all that. And he's like, okay, that kind of makes sense. But at the end, he's like, no, I want to do this. I'm going to participate in the competition. He does his swim practice for the day, and then he goes into the showers afterwards. And he's in the huge shower room at night. He's taking a shower, and he remembers all of her ghost talk. He starts getting scared, and he's like singing, trying to like cope with his fear. Meanwhile, a couple of guys sneak into the locker room, and Sanjay actually has the superstition that he can only win a competition if he wears the swimsuit that he was wearing the previous day. So he developed this habit of practicing the day before the competition, wearing the swimsuit that he plans to wear the next day. So these guys are planning to steal the swimsuit and hide it so that Sanjay will be off his game and does badly in the competition. So they grab the swimsuit, because it's like drying on a rack. They grab the swimsuit and they're about to leave when someone grabs the guy's wrist, the one who's holding the swimsuit, and the guy screams. And now Sanjay's still in the shower, scared. He hears someone scream. So he's like, okay, I need to go check out what's going on. He turns off the shower. And it turns out the hand that grabbed this guy belongs to Imsol. So she stops them from taking the swimsuit. And she threatens them, like, she's like, I'll tell everybody what you're doing. And they're literally playing tug of war with the swimsuit while Sanjay is getting closer and closer. And the guys finally freak out and they run away, leaving the swimsuit behind. But now Imsol is left alone in the boys' locker room in the middle of the night.
With his swimsuit.
Holding his swimsuit. So Sanjay's still getting closer and she doesn't know what to do. She looks around and she jumps in the laundry cart. Like, she covers herself up with the towels, and now she has to wait until he's done changing. Everything's fine until he's done. He's about to leave, but she like gets a cramp or something. She adjusts her position and she ends up bumping the cart. And he's like, wait a minute, what was that? And he's still scared about the ghost, right? So he gets closer to the laundry cart and he's about to like pick up the towel on her head, and she like leaps out of the cart. He freaks out, falls on his butt, stunned. He's like, there's a ghost here. So she grabs the towel, covers her face with it, and runs out before he can come to his senses. He finally is like, okay, there's a person. It's a real person. And he chases after her. They make their way out of the locker room and to the pool. And she's like running by the pool when he catches up to her. and he like manages to grab her, but they lose their balance and like both end up like falling in the water. He sees her face, realizes it's Imsol, and that right then his swimsuit floats up. I guess she was still holding it when she ran away, and he gets really angry because he thinks she stole his swimsuit to stop him from participating in the competition the next day. He gets really angry, and this is the first time he's like truly mad, because before this, no matter what she was doing, no matter how much she was bugging him, he just kind of like brushed it off, or he was like whatever, and he kind of humored her in a way by not really doing anything about it. But he actually gets really mad this time, and he's like, why are you doing this to me? And she's like, okay, how do I tell him? And she's like, okay, fine, think of it as I had a dream where you participate in the competition and you get hurt really badly, and it felt very real, so I was trying to stop that from happening. He's like, why would you even care? It's not like I die. She like obviously completely breaks down, starts crying, and she's like, yes, you die, but I can't even do anything about it. I can't save you, I can't tell you, I can't do anything. But obviously time is stopped the second she starts talking about his death, and then once she's done with her rant, time resumes again. He doesn't hear any of it. He still doesn't have an explanation for her behavior. He just leaves. He's like sick and tired of her. So Sanjay goes home after the fight that he has with Imsol, and at the same time we see that Ajushi from earlier, who was having an argument with Imsol's mom in Sanjay's room, and yes, you were right, he is Sanjay's dad, and he's just like leaving food or something for him on the table when he looks down and he sees something under the bed, like something sticking out from under the bed. So he bends down, pulls it out, and it's the missing Basic Instinct videotape.
That's funny.
Yeah. Sanjay like reaches home and he's about to go in, and that's when he gets a phone call from his friend. That friend is like, are you okay? Like, I heard that this guy was planning to steal your swimsuit to mess up your game tomorrow. So that's when Sanjay realizes that, okay, Imsol was probably trying to stop that from happening, and she wasn't the one who was trying to take the swimsuit, and he misunderstood her. So, and it starts raining. He looks at the umbrellas and he's like, okay, I know she must be stuck in the rain walking home right now. So he goes to find her. Now Imsol's walking home, and right as she's about to cross the street, like she is a little scared of crossing the street because she keeps remembering her accident. Obviously it was very traumatic for her, right, to be paralyzed. She crosses the street, like, but it's raining, and she ends up stuck in the headlights of an oncoming car. And she freezes because she's like remembering her accident and the fear. And she feels like she kind of has a fragment of memory of Sanjay like calling her name. And right then, like, Sanjay actually shows up and pulls her out of the way of the car. And she just faints, like in his arms, because she was so scared and she thought she was going to get hit by a car again. So that's when we finally see Sanjay's perspective on all of this. When Sanjay first moved into the house across from Imsol, he gets home and he sees a package at their doorstep, and he realizes like they delivered it to the wrong address. It's supposed to be for the people across the street, not his house. Picks it up and he's about to leave it at their door when Imsol comes home, and she mistakes him for like the delivery guy. So it's raining, so she first like puts the umbrella over him. This is where it all began, all the umbrellas. She's like, oh, I'm sorry for, you know, like I'm gonna be ordering a lot of things. There's a lot of stuff that's going to come. I'm gonna thank you in advance, and I'm like, sorry, like, because the next one is going to be much heavier. Here, have a candy. And she gives him like this little candy, and she even gives him her umbrella. Like, okay, why don't you just take it with you? The next time you deliver something, you can just leave the umbrella here. And then the candy that she gives him
It's the same candy that he actually likes.
yeah, the one from the future that they all think is his favorite candy. It's the one that she gave him. This is clearly the moment like where everything started, okay? The moment he fell in love.
So Yoon Sanjay already knew her.
Okay, wait, like there's more. I'll tell you. So he returns the umbrella, and their video rental store is in the same building, like it's on the ground floor of the same building where they live. So he returns the umbrella, looks inside the store, realizes like she's minding the store that day. So he goes in, and she's like half asleep already. So he's like looking around while pretending not to be looking at her. She's basically asleep, and her head like falls to the side.
And he puts a hand.
Yeah, he immediately runs there and puts his arm under her head for her, like, so she doesn't get hurt. Maybe these are the reflexes of an athlete, or maybe a man in love.
Reflexes of a K-drama, I would say.
Like, if it was me, I would just sympathize with the pain of hitting their head, and I'd be like, are you okay? You know, maybe help them out. But not like run up to catch them. Or maybe that's the difference between a man and a woman being in love.
Maybe that's possible.
Yeah. So he literally gets stuck there for a while, like with his arm under her head. She's using him as a pillow. He's like bent over the counter. He's 6'2". He's bent over the counter with his arm stretched out under her head. He's cramping up, like he's like trying to shake off the cramps in his legs and other arm. And then someone walks in, like after a while. It's been a while, and someone walks in. So she gets up because she hears the bell on the door. She gets up, and he immediately like snatches his hand away and pretends like he wasn't doing anything and just looks away like, huh, what? Like, I don't know, not me. Imsol, like, you know, she greets like the new customer. She looks around and then she looks at Sanjay, and she like starts to squint almost as if like, I think I recognize him. Like, you can see the recognition is like kind of dawning on her, and he panics because he doesn't want her to recognize him as like the delivery guy or something, I guess. And he just grabs like the closest videotape next to him, like he slams it down and he's like, I'm renting this. And he gives his dad's name and number because he doesn't want her to know his name. And then she's like, okay, here you go. And then he takes the tape, looks down and realizes it's Basic Instinct, and he runs away. He's like, oh no. Even later, like when she runs up to him and hugs him by the pool, when she first got to the past, he's literally thinking, like, what's going on? Am I dreaming?
This is what I wanted?
No, this is what I wanted, but this seems strange. Like, why is she doing this? She doesn't even know me. But like, it would be nice if it wasn't a dream. I'm sure that's what he wanted. Even the friend request, he was actually gonna accept it, but his dad came into the room and he got startled and accidentally clicked decline. The time they go to school on the same bus, he actually waited for her, like inside his gate until like she left. And then he followed her all the way to the bus stop, and he was just walking behind her, like laughing. He literally stands behind her as she wonders out loud, like, oh, like I wonder why he didn't accept my friend request. It feels like we're not going to be friends. I feel him drifting farther and farther away from me. And he's standing there smiling, listening to all this, like behind her. The zipper on her bag is open, okay? He even slowly closes it, and she doesn't realize. Honestly, yeah, everything makes so much more sense now because, like, if you think about it, I don't know if you noticed, but after her first running hug/assault, quite a few times after that, he was the one who approached her. Like when she was on the bridge, he approached her immediately after she attacked him.
Even the bus stop.
Bus stop and like him holding the umbrella for her, all of that, he approaches her many times. That makes a lot of sense. And his reaction to Kinte-san also makes so much more sense now.
Of course, he's confused.
Exactly.
She likes
I
him.
know, he's jealous.
But I'll tell you what, I actually like his perspective more than the entire...
I think you are not alone. This is probably almost everybody who watched the show. I watched the first episode and the second episode and I was like, cool, I like this, I'm enjoying it. But when I found out, like, this is
It's
the
damn
end,
cute.
yeah, at the end of the second episode, I was like, okay, this is it. This is going to be an amazing show.
So the problem is, unless we go through the other parts, you'll not enjoy it as much as you do.
Definitely,
right now.
right? Because if I just told you from the beginning without context, like, oh, this is how he feels and all of that, it wouldn't be even remotely as cute because you have no context for it and you're not seeing the other side of it, right? So now seeing Imsol's thing and seeing it from her perspective, and then finally after all of the embarrassing and humiliating things and all of the ridiculous things that she's done, we finally see his perspective and you actually realize, wait, this is what was actually happening. After he basically pulled her out of the way of a car when she was frozen, he sits her down, they sit down in a park and they're talking. And he's like, you know, what happened? Like, why did you freeze like that? So she tells him she was in a car accident 15 years ago, but she doesn't really remember anything about it. And she should just think of it as like a blessing because, you know, she also doesn't remember the pain associated with it. She's talking about the accident that happens pretty much now, but for her, it's been 15 years because she's from the future. So he apologizes for like everything he said earlier about the swimsuit when they were at the pool. And then he tells her, you know what, I'm going to compete and I'm definitely going to win a medal and I'll make sure your dream doesn't come true, which sounds bad out of context, but he's talking about the dream was about him getting hurt. So the next day, they're at the swim meet. Sunday's like ready to dive in, and she's worried because there's a lot riding on this. And if he gets hurt again, it means nothing can be changed. Fate is predetermined. You know, like everything she's doing, it'll be a waste, and eventually he'll end up killing himself. But he actually ends up winning gold, and he's not hurt during the competition.
And why is that?
He gets first place. Like, I don't know, maybe mentally he was just in a better headspace or whatever. And they have like this adorable moment where like right after he wins, like he's like looking for her and she's like in the audience stands and their like gazes are locked. They're like across the auditorium from each other. And all he's thinking is this the right time? Because the previous night, like when he walked her home after they had their talk, and they're like, okay, let's see each other tomorrow at the swim competition. And after she leaves, he blows like 10 flying kisses at her.
Okay, so she's not seeing the.
She's not seeing it. It's after after she walks away and heads home. And he immediately gets caught by his best friend. So his response is to panic and then blow kisses at his friend to cover it up. I feel like as soon as we find out about how he's been in love with Insol, like this entire time, his like cool persona just collapses. And now I'm like, oh, for what cool? He's just goofy. So, his friend obviously realizes that Sanjay has feelings for Insol and they're talking about it. Sanjay's like, she likes me, I think, she said she was my fan. But his friend is like, yeah, but she's your fan. Being a fan and liking someone are different. Which is, again, like a very nuanced topic that they just very, like, easily just throw in there, And his friend's like, you need to confess so that you'll actually get somewhere. Like, you'll know whether she's even interested in you. You need to confess. But make sure it's the right timing. So Sanjay's like, I'm going to win first place tomorrow. And then I'll ask her out. So he does win. And he's staring at her thinking, okay, is now the right time? Okay, maybe I can propose to her now. Sanjay tells Imsol he wants to go somewhere with her alone. And they're like walking on the street. And he's really distracted because he's struggling to find the place that he looked up online before going to the swim meet.
Wherever he wanted to take her.
But he can't let her know. Because he didn't tell her it's a date. So he's like super distracted and not listening to her and sounds kind of annoyed. And her conclusion is, I think he's hangry. So she, like right as they find the restaurant that he was looking for, she sees like this other diner, like small place, which has like more hearty like soups, all these middle-aged people and like, families around. So she drags him there. So they end up there instead of going to this cool date spot with like pasta and stuff. So they're at their date and, he's such a perfect boyfriend. Honestly, he like separates the food for her and gives it to her and he's like, make sure you blow on it. It's really hard. Be careful. Like he's so attentive to her. But she doesn't even like think of it in that way because she's just thinking, I'm such a successful fan. I even get to eat with you. That's her response. And he's like, okay. And he's like, okay, is this the right time? Probably not. This environment is really not conducive to this. So he's like, okay, tell me about Kim Tae-sung. And she's like, what are you talking about? That was so long ago. Like, I don't care about him anymore. Sanjay gets really excited, but obviously he plays it off. Like, he's like, oh, I don't care. He's being all cool about it. So after lunch, they're walking around and Sanjay's like, okay, maybe now is the time. Maybe now I can confess. But Imsol sees like this photo booth type thing, but I think it's for passport photos. It's not like the photo booth that we're thinking of. And he's already like, okay, should I confess? And that's all he's thinking in a loop. And he's like, maybe I should confess right now. And he's about to start talking, but because he takes so long to like finish his sentence, she's like, why don't we just go take a picture in the photo booth? He's like really excited. He's like, we're taking pictures together. But she's thinking, oh, I was always so jealous of all his fans that he took selfies with. So she wants to take a picture with him. I mean, you can really see the difference in their perspectives, like how he's treating her like someone he's in love with and she's treating him like her idol. So they do end up in the photo booth and they actually take these really adorable pictures together. And he once again tries to confess because they're like sitting really close to each other, right next to each other. And he wants to confess to her like right after the picture. And he's being all sexy, like he puts his arm behind her, he gets up super close and he gets like most of the words out and then he's interrupted by the machine. And she gets distracted like a little excited golden retriever. And she's like, oh, the pictures. And he's like, okay, I guess I'm not confessing now either. So he doesn't end up confessing by that point. And they're headed back home. They're on a bus. And he's like, maybe I should confess now. And he's like, okay, this is the time. And he turns to her and like he opens his mouth. And Imsol is like, don't you dare talk to me right now. Okay? It's because she has to use the bathroom and she's like holding it in. She's dying holding it in. But she's like, I can't tell him. That's too embarrassing. That's when there's an accident up ahead and the bus has to stop, okay?
So they have to walk?
No, they don't have to walk, but it's going to take longer. They're in the bus and they're going to be stuck there for much longer. So then she hears a kid saying that the kid has to go to the bathroom. So she hopes that they'll stop the bus for the kid and then she can also go to the bathroom, right? But that doesn't work because his mom literally hands him a cup and she's like, go in this cup. She's like, what do I do? What do I do? And she's like panicking. When Sanjay like suddenly gets up and he begs the driver to stop the bus, and he's acting like he has to go to the bathroom. He looks like he's really struggling to hold it in, and he makes it very, very obvious without actually saying it. He's like, I just have urgent business to attend to. And he looks like he's about to burst, okay? He's doing the pee dance. So they get off the bus and Imsol is trying to find an excuse to also do her business without making it obvious. So she gets off the bus with him and she's like, oh, you go this way and I'll just be here or something. And she's saying something like that. He grabs the light from her and he's like, I'll just keep watch here. You go do what you have to do. So he knew that she had to go, but she was struggling to like say anything. So he pretended like he had to go to get the bus driver to like stop for her, which is so cute, but so absolutely humiliating for Imsol also. As she like walks away to go do her business, he's literally like, well, this is definitely not the right time.
Definitely not the right time.
So they finally make it home and they're standing in between their houses, like on the road between their houses, and cherry blossom petals start falling. And he's like, okay, this is the time. The scene is set. Like, I'm going to do this now. So he's like, thank you for coming today. And she's like, I would follow you to the other side of the world. Actually, no, even if you were in another time, I'd cross time and space to see you. And he's like, okay, like, he's like, oh, that's amazing. Like, you know, she really cares about me. And then she continues, because I'm your fan. And he's like, okay, how long are you going to be my fan? I want you to stop being my fan. And he's about to say, like, because I like you. But he hasn't finished saying that yet. And Imsol's already panicking, right? Because she's like, wait, if I'm not allowed to be his fan, but I have to be by his side for 15 years, what do I do? So she just blurts out, okay, do you want to be friends? And Sanjay shuts his mouth, looks up, and his friend is actually on the roof. And he just finished throwing the cherry blossom petals. And he turns off the fan that was like blowing them around. So yeah,
His friend's like, there's no point.
yeah. So Sanjay has just been friend zoned. He literally goes inside his room. His friend follows him up, and he's like, "I figured you hadn't confessed to her yet when you didn't respond to my text about whether you confessed, right? So I set this whole thing up. I got the cherry blossom petals and the fan. I climbed up on the roof, and you still couldn't do it. What do you mean? I don't want you to be my fan anymore. Who confesses like that?" And Sanjay's like, "Just stop talking to me, okay?" Like, and he's really upset. Because he's like, you know, I've just been turned down. I've just been friend zoned. And his friend is like, what are you talking? Like, you haven't been turned down yet. And Sanjay's like, what? I haven't? He's like, of course you haven't. You haven't even confessed to her yet. How will she turn you down? And his friend means it in the sense of she is going to turn you down if you confess. Okay, it's just that it hasn't happened yet. But Sanjay isn't hearing any of that. He's just like, okay, she hasn't actually rejected me. So he's just like happy in his dreamland, and he's like thinking about all of the things that she said to him about how she'd follow him across time. So anyway, the next day, Imsol goes looking for Sanjay at the pool, but she can't find him anywhere. When she finally does find someone on the swim team, they tell her that Sanjay was taken to the hospital earlier. Okay. So what happened was earlier that day during swim practice, like they were just doing practice, whatever, and he actually broke a lot of records during the swim competition. Like he beat the time that he was aiming to beat and all of that. But during practice, he ends up hurting his shoulder. He ends up ripping his shoulder again. So in the hospital, they tell him, you know, it is badly torn again. You need surgery again, and you can probably eventually get it back to mostly functioning in 2 to 3 years with rehab, but it'll never go back to how it was before you ever had the injury. So you probably wouldn't be able to like continue being an athlete because it won't be at like 100% functionality ever again. So, you know, Sanjay's like really down, really depressed about it when his dad calls him, and his dad tells him to like come to his restaurant. His dad owns a restaurant, but when he gets there, he sees everyone his dad knows gathered to congratulate him, and it's a celebration for him winning first place in the swim competition the previous day.
His dad's still not aware of the fact
he hasn't told his dad yet. And his dad's like boasting about how he couldn't qualify for the Beijing Olympics because he was out with an injury and he was in rehab, but he'll definitely make it to the next one in like London, I think. And Sanjay doesn't want to be a party pooper, so he just, you know, accepts everyone's congratulations. He doesn't say anything. He doesn't tell them the truth, obviously. Also because it's not just his dad. They're all these random people. Like, is he just supposed to say this earth-shattering thing out of nowhere during the celebration? So he just goes and quietly like broods in the corner. And then his dad comes up to him and he's like, you're going to Australia. this summer. So his dad enrolled him in a special training program for swimmers in Australia. And he's like, I want you to be able to train like all of the other top athletes. And I already paid the fee. And I also bought business class tickets. And Sanjay's like not having it. He's like, you shouldn't have done that. Why don't you just cancel it? And his dad's like, if you're worried about the money, like I don't mind. Like you're my only child. Of course I want to do all this for you. But Sanjay's like, no, like cancel it. Like it's not gonna happen. Why didn't you ask me? And his dad obviously doesn't understand what's going on. And Sanjay finally explodes and he's like, I'm gonna quit swimming. Okay, and he leaves the restaurant. So Imsol, who was searching for him all day, finally comes to the restaurant because she knows his dad owned a restaurant as part of in knowing Sanjay's history as a super fan. So she goes to the restaurant and like she sees Sanjay and his dad outside.
Having the squabble.
Yeah. She doesn't go up to them, but she's eavesdropping. He tells his dad, like, I've made my decision. I'm not going to swim again. And his dad's like, is it because of your shoulder injury? I know rehab was really hard, but why would you say you're going to quit? But Sanjay's like, refusing to listen. I mean, obviously he has a reason, but he doesn't explain it. I don't know why, but he's like, I'm not gonna explain it. So they have a big fight. His dad like slaps him and he's like, if you're gonna keep talking about quitting swimming, don't come back home. And Sunday like leaves. He goes to his locker at the pool, clears everything out, and you can see like just how much he cared about swimming, like all of the stuff inside, all of the little motivational notes he wrote to himself, and and for how desperately he wanted to break the record of like 1 minute 49 seconds, all of that. Like I think it was for like 200-meter freestyle, but I don't know, don't quote me on that. He remembers like how much work he put in for his shoulder injury and the rehab and all of that, and how happy he was when he was finally able to go back to swimming, and he just like breaks down sobbing.
I mean, it's obvious, right?
Yeah.
You're so passionate about swimming and this is happening for the second time, and for this time it's for real.
Yeah, like it's like this is the moment where he knows his life is going to be different from what he thought it was going to be before. So Imsol overhears all of this. She knows that like he's going to quit. She also knows that he hurt his shoulder, right? Because he went to the hospital. Even if nobody specifically told her that, she obviously knows it's that because she knows the future. So she realizes fate didn't change, right? And he ended up hurting his shoulder again, just like in the original timeline. Okay, it happened on a different day, but it still happened. So now she's like, that means she won't be able to stop her accident again, and she might end up paralyzed again. And Imso is also like struggling with reality. I don't think anything will change no matter how much I try. I personally think it is clear that it is possible for things to change because it happened on a different day. So there is some change, right? If nothing could change at all, it would
you could at least push it further. Maybe days, weeks.
Yeah, or maybe like she didn't change enough things before it to affect it that much. Right? So like if she changed more things beforehand, maybe it wouldn't have happened at all. Or maybe his shoulder injury was something that was always going to happen unless he quit swimming, because his shoulder was already so severely strained. Imsol goes to find Sanjay, but he isn't at school, and she's talking to his friend. She's like, his best friend. So she's like, what's going on? Like, just look after him. And so Sanjay's like crashing at his friend's place because his dad is like, don't come home. And Imsol is like, please just look after him. Be nice to him unless you want to regret it in the future, because this friend is actually part of the boy group in the future with Sanjay. That's when a ball comes flying out of nowhere and smacks her in the face, okay? She falls on the ground, has a full nosebleed. Like there's like 2 streams of blood just dripping down her face. And that's when she remembers that the same exact thing happened in the original timeline when she was walking home with her best friend. And when she got home afterwards, her house had been in a fire.
So she has to now go running to stop the fire.
Yeah, her house had been in a fire, and her mom had 3rd-degree burns on her arm and stuff. So she's like, I need to stop the fire. So she gets up, she just wipes off the blood and just goes running. And right as she goes outside, she sees Kim Tae-sung on his motorbike. She's like, she convinces him, please give me a ride home. I think there's a fire. He's like, just call the fire truck. What are you gonna do to stop it? He's like, I don't think there's a fire yet. Just listen to me. We just need to go put out the fire right now. I mean, he thinks that she's just making excuses to get closer to him because he knows that she likes him, or at least the previous version of her. But, she finally manages to convince him. They're heading to her house. Meanwhile, at home, her brother is at home. I think he's supposed to be in college or around that age. So her brother's at home making ramen, whatever. And her mom is at the video rental shop. So she calls him and she's like, you have to go unclog the toilet in 202. So they own the entire building, and And so they also have to manage everything that happens. And the tenants want her to call a plumber, but her mom is like, it's not worth it. I can just have my son go unclog the toilet. She's like, you go do that and make sure you turn off the rags that are like boiling on the stove, like the dish rags. So he turns off his ramen, but he forgets to turn off the other stove, the one with the dish rags boiling, and he reluctantly goes off to clean someone else's toilet. That's when Im-sol's best friend comes to her house because she couldn't find her at school. And that's when and her brother comes back from cleaning the toilet. And these two get into like a full-blown argument. By this point, the towels on the stove catch fire and they're actually quite close to it, but they don't realize because they're arguing like so intensely. Eventually, her friend, Im-sol's friend, notices the scent of smoke and she's like, is something burning? And his response is, yeah, it's me burning up on the inside from all of your unfair accusations. Man, I was so annoyed with these two. Her friend is like, no, I think I smell something burning. And she takes like a deep breath. And by this point, there's like a lot of, the fire is like pretty big and there's smoke everywhere.
Is he blind or what?
So I think that they're standing a little bit away and not looking in that direction. But I don't know. I think you would have felt the heat by that point. So she takes a deep breath to be like, what is this smell? And she faints from the smoke. And that's when he finally notices that there's a fire. He freaks out, he carries her friend out of there. And that's when Kim Tae-sung and Im-sol rush into the apartment. And Kim Tae-sung manages to find a fire extinguisher and they put out the fire. So they salvage most of the apartment, but more importantly, her mom was supposed to end up with third-degree burns.
And she's safe.
And she never got those burns. That means you can change things, or Im-sol can change things. So she couldn't fully stop the fire, but she did save her mom. With Sanjay, his dad finally finds out about his shoulder because the coach calls his dad. And, they finally have a heart-to-heart talk about why he had the injury and, he should get surgery soon. This man has literally been living in pain. Ryu Sun Jae has literally been going around with a 90% torn rotator cuff in his shoulder for 3 days without doing anything. He looks like he's really sick and in pain, okay? But he's refusing to tell anybody. I don't know. And his dad is also after they make up and they're talking, and they've apologized to each other and just talked it out. His dad's like, oh, by the way, I returned the videotape. And if you want to watch something like that in the future, you should just watch it on DVD out in the open instead of secretly renting a VHS tape. And his dad obviously doesn't believe that he never watched it, no matter how much he argues. So Sanjay finally gets the surgery. He's been walking around for days, right, with his torn rotator cuff. He finally gets the surgery, and the doctor tells him, his shoulder was almost completely destroyed. So, being an athlete is probably out of the question. So Im-sol actually overheard what the doctor said earlier about never being an athlete again, and she's just bawling her eyes out. And Sanjay finds her and she goes off somewhere else to a corner of the hospital and she's just crying alone. And Sanjay sits behind her and he's just watching her cry. And he's like, I'm not even crying. Why are you crying so much? But he doesn't talk to her. And after that, we get a montage of Im-sol showing off her superfan abilities. She sends him lunch boxes every day and candy. She gives everybody in his hospital ward cupcakes. She tells them she's his biggest fan. He doesn't ever run into her because he keeps waiting to see her, but she shows up whenever he is in there, drops off the goodies, and then just disappears like smoke. I don't think he's doing it on purpose, but it just happens. They don't run into each other. So a week later, he finally comes home from the hospital, and she knows that, right? But she's like, okay, I want to help him with his recovery. So she goes to his house and sees Sanjay's dad. And she's like, here's some nourishing chicken soup that she secretly stole from her grandma. And she finally introduces herself as their neighbor. Her dad recognizes her as Sanjay's fan from all the hospital visits. And she's like, oh, I'm actually also your neighbor. So she tells him that her grandma made it. So he's like, oh, I have to give you something in return. So he goes in and brings out this giant jar of homemade juice. And he's like, give this to your grandma as a thank you for the chicken. She obviously can't tell her grandma about it because she stole the chicken soup. So she's like, fine, I'll just drink it myself. And she ends up drinking most of the jar without realizing it. And she's getting all hot and feels weird and stuff. She opens the window and she sees Sanjay leaving. So Sanjay goes to the pool. And he's just brooding by the side of the pool, right, in the middle of the night. So I guess he's pondering about what could have been when he hears something crash to the ground. And he looks over and out pops Imsol. She's really unsteady. She's struggling to stay on her feet. And he's like, are you drunk? And she's like, no way. And he's like, you smell like alcohol. And she's like sniffing her hair and stuff. And she's like, there's no way. I only drank the juice that your dad made. And Sanjay's like light bulb goes off and he's like, the juice that my dad made, that's made with alcohol. Like you can tell there was easily like a gallon of alcohol or something in that thing. I'm surprised she hasn't gotten alcohol poisoning already. So she is fully drunk, right? And Sanjay sits her down and she's telling him these terrible puns. Oh, you don't like this pun? You're zing, I tell you, zing. Amazing. Really horrible puns, okay? And he's totally secretly laughing on the side, but he has to pretend like he isn't. When he finally like convinces her to stop, she's like, okay, let's listen to some music. And she takes out her MP3 and they do that classic like sharing wired earbuds thing that we can never do again with wireless earbuds. I swear they set this show in 2008 just for like moments like these. So Imsol is drunk, she's starting to fall asleep, and she ends up putting her head on his shoulder. And he's like, oh, I'm glad I at least have one good shoulder. He's so in love with her. Like, but then
That's
she...
so sweet. I like what he said.
He is literally like my favorite character in terms of like a love interest. And then she nuzzles into his chest like forward and he gets a little scared and freaked out and he jumps up and the MP3 ends up falling on the floor. So he's standing in front of her. She opens her eyes, but because she's drunk, she thinks that he's a life-size cutout poster thing that she had in her room in the future from like a commercial that he did. You know how they sell those, right? Yeah. So she gets up, accidentally steps on the MP3, and she gets closer to him, and she's like saying weird things. She's like, oh, he moves. Oh, he's talking. And stuff like that. He's trying to convince her to go home, but they end up like super close together, and he just blurts out that he likes her. And she tells him, like, you know, keep smiling like this. I'll always be by your side so you never get lonely or have any scary thoughts. I'll always be by your side, so live a long life. And he obviously gets all the feels and he kisses her. Then we cut to the next day. Imsol is on the bus. She's headed to school. We know what she's thinking, right? And she remembers them listening to music together, but she doesn't remember anything after that. And Sanjay tries to catch up to her because he missed the bus and like he saw her from outside the window, right? So he ends up taking the next one.
Okay.
So Imsol's still listening to like music on her MP3 and all of a sudden like something starts playing. So remember how she stepped on the MP3 the previous night? It actually recorded from that moment. So now there's a recording of what happened last night and it's playing and she's just cringing, right? She's like, what the heck was I saying, right? Like, oh my God, I can't believe this. And she gets off the bus, she's walking to the school, she's still listening to the recording, and at the same time, Kim Tae-sung is off somewhere else in the school and he's stalked by the girl who's always chasing him. So I didn't mention her before, but there's a girl who's constantly been after him, but he's not interested in her. And she also bullied Imsol a lot for liking Kim Tae-sung. She's like, back off, he's mine. And she doesn't like Imsol, obviously. And she's confronting Kim Tae-sung about how he's spending a lot of time with Imsol and like, why would you give her a ride on your bike when you wouldn't let me on your bike?
Classic bully.
Yeah, and like, how can you like someone like her when you don't like me? So Kim Tae-sung gets irritated with her and he just wants her to leave. He wants her to stop chasing him. So he's like, okay, I'll show you how I can like someone like her, and goes up to Imsol. And Imsol is like still listening to the recording and she's about to reach the part where
he says he likes her.
Yeah, where he confesses. And Kim Tae-sung pops out in front of her and she pulls out the earbuds. Right then, naturally, very classic Kdrama moment. And by this point, Sanjay, who caught the next bus, who was running up to her, because in his head, he's like, I told her I liked her and I kissed her. So we're kind of sort of maybe together now. That's what he's thinking. And he's like about to walk up to her and about to catch up to her when Kim Tae-sung is like, let's go out. He asks her out. She's obviously really shocked. She's literally like, what? And then her watch starts glitching and she blinks and she's back in the stream in that creek of water she was in before she went back in time when she was looking for her watch. She looks around, her wheelchair is like still at the top of the stairs where she left it when she crawled into the creek, and the big screen on the building is still showing the news about Sanjay's death. And that's the end of the episode.
Okay. Did she press anything? Did she do anything? Nothing at all.
We'll find out. So watch part 2 to find out what happens next in Sanjay and Imsol's story.